What do you call a Spartan king that has a disease? Leonidas. A few years ago, or maybe a few months ago, I don't remember, Microsoft came out with a new browser and they called it Spartan. I think they called it that to refer to the 300 people in total that were going to use it. Okay, those are two really dumb jokes. I'm just going to, I had more, but even I think those ones are bad, so I'm going to stop. Okay, we got two more slides. Oh, by the way, I haven't recorded a social studies class from the classroom for a while. See, here's the classroom, everybody. I bet you miss it. Not as much as you miss me, but I'm still here in the classroom. A couple days a week here and there, recording videos and doing some grading, stuff like that. So there you go. Okay, we are on the last two slides of our chapter comparing Greece and Sparta, chapter 14. Then we're going to have chapter 15 next, and after chapter 15 is over, we'll have a test on chapters 14 and 15, and that's going to close out the year for us. We are almost to summertime. Just a few weeks left. All right, so in the last video, I talked about how and why Sparta turned into a military state. I also talked about the structure of the Spartan oligarchic government, how they had two royal families with a king at the top of each family. So they had two kings. The idea is basically if one king gets killed in battle, hey, they got another king ready to go. We talked about the Council of Elders, the Assembly. We talked about the ephors. We talked about the helots, or helots, however you want to pronounce it. And the helot revolts and how the Spartans would control the helots and how this led to the development of a military state. Right? Remember, a military state is a state that's organized in order to wage war. Right? It's a government that is organized in order to have a big army and powers over the people to be able to wage war. And why did Sparta rely on war rather than trade or commerce? Or colonization, primarily because conquest was the only way to acquire resources for this inland city-state that didn't have access to the coast, like Athens did, for example. And so they couldn't get to the sea very easily. So they had to get resources by forcibly taking it from others. All right, so yeah, we got two more slides here, slide 18 and 19 on Spartan oligarchy. So part of being in a military state is that the law is really important and needs to be followed very, very strictly, right? And Athens actually has the same idea about the law, right? So it's the idea that the law governs everything from big decisions that the government is making to little decisions that a small farmer is making that don't really affect anyone except for himself, right? Law governs everything. Unlike the Athenians, however, the Spartans believed equally strongly in their military. So they thought there's two things that really matter in Sparta. Number one is the law and making sure everyone obeys it, because we're a military state. And military states require having strong, clear laws that everyone obeys, and there's punishments if you disobey the law. Right? And then the second thing that they thought was most important was having a really strong, disciplined military. Right? So Spartan society was organized along military lines. Right? So everything that existed in Spartan society existed basically in order to serve the law or to serve the military. So Sparta did not have art like we see in other city-states. They didn't have much literature. They didn't have luxury goods. So our English word Spartan describes something that's very bare and sparse and just kind of rugged and tough. Kind of like me, actually. Just kidding. But yeah, our English word Spartan comes from the city-state Sparta, because like I said, Sparta didn't have luxury items. Everything was just kind of like existing in order to serve one purpose, and that was it. Right? Sparta was not where you would want to live if you wanted to have a comfortable, luxurious life. That's for sure. Okay, so how would you grow up in a Spartan state? So, if you were a boy, when you were little, you were educated in the military. So, Spartans, like the Athenians, did have a school system. However, the Spartan school system taught you very, very different things than the Athenian school system did. Right? In Athens, the school system would teach you how to give speeches and how to use logic and how to use rhetoric and maybe how to speak other languages. In the Spartan education system, you would live in barracks with other students, other male students. You would learn to read and to write because you had to in order to function well as a soldier. You had to be able to read and write. But other than that, pretty much all you did was learn how to use weapons, how to march in a military formation, how to do things like hunt and fish. Right? So it's sort of like Boy Scouts to the extreme. Right? That's kind of how I would describe it for young boys. And then as you got older, it became more like rigid military training. Right? All right. So yeah, the Spartan boys definitely did not receive a well-rounded education. They were actually taught not to think for themselves. They were taught to think as members of a unit, as members of a group. But individual achievements did not matter at all in the Spartan education system. In Athens, they had like competitions as to who could give the most persuasive speech, who could write the best poem, things like that, right? In Sparta, they had none of that. All that mattered is that you blended into your group and that your group did its job. Spartan boys were also, of course, very heavily disciplined, and this meant that obedience was really important in Sparta. An interesting fact about Spartan education is that they deliberately did not give the boys enough food to eat, right? And it wasn't because there wasn't enough food available, it's because they wanted to teach the boys to learn to steal food from the weak ones. One major idea in Spartan society is survival of the fittest. It's the idea that only the strong get to survive and the weak we need to get rid of. So Spartan boys were not given enough to eat, so the strong would steal from the weak. Now, what's interesting is even though they were being encouraged to steal, it was actually forbidden to do so technically. So if you got caught stealing, that was also considered a sign of weakness. So you'd be beaten or punished. Right? And then when you turn 18, now you're a real soldier and you start to train as a member of a phalanx and you get married. However, right when you get married, you get taken away from your wife and you spend basically the next 12 years in the Spartan military and you barely see your wife at all. So you turn 18, you're a soldier, you get married, and then you basically never see your wife for the next 12 years or so. Right? So you serve in the military from age 18 to 30, and then when you turn 30, you leave the military and you have to take a test. Right? And this test is what is going to allow you to become a citizen. Now, it's a really hard test, and it's mostly a physical test. And in order to pass it, you had to go through a series of like grueling challenges. And if you succeeded in passing this test, then you became a full-fledged Spartan citizen, and you were called an equal. So an equal is someone who gets to be part of the assembly, and you get a plot of land that is worked by the helots, the helots. Now remember, the helots don't work for you, they work for the state, but they do farm your land and you get to keep some of what they grow. Right? So being an equal is like a really good goal for a Spartan male. If you did not pass this test, you became something called an inferior, and you were basically an outcast from society and you were never allowed to be a citizen. So you definitely wanted to pass this test. Now, most Spartan men failed this test and became inferiors. Remember, Sparta is all about the strongest are the ones who get everything. The weak, we don't care what happens to them. Now let's talk about women and then we'll stop. So women in Sparta actually had greater rights and responsibilities than women in other city-states like Athens, right? And this was because it was believed that in order to have a strong army, you have to have strong women to give birth to baby boys who grow up to be strong soldiers. So Spartan women were expected to be strong, right? So my friend Muscles Madison, she's really strong. She'd be a good Spartan woman. Don't tell her I said that. She'll get really mad at me. So unfortunately, this meant that the idea of survival of the fittest also applied to babies, right? So if a Spartan woman gave birth to a baby that had something wrong with it, maybe it was like really small or really sick, maybe it had some sort of deformity, they would kill the baby, right? So they believed that, yeah, you have to give birth. If you're a woman, your job is to give birth to a strong, healthy baby boy, right? And then you raise these children according to Spartan values while your husband, remember the husbands from the age 18 to 30 are away in the military, you basically raise the baby by yourself. Now, because Spartan women had to be strong, they were given, like I said, more freedoms, responsibilities, and rights than women of other city-states. So many Spartan women had the ability to vote, for example. Right? They didn't get to be members of the assembly, but they did have certain voting rights. Right? One final note, unlike the Athenians who valued individual talent and expression and evolution and change, Spartans did not like change at all. They valued conformity. Right? Their belief was conform or die. Right? You better fit into our system. You better play ball and play by the rules. Otherwise, we don't want you as part of our society. So Athens changes a lot over time, and it becomes wealthier and more connected with the rest of the world. Sparta basically just sharpens their spears and waits for war. That's what they do. They focus on perfecting what they have. They don't want any contact with anything that's going to change their way of life. All right, that is it for our chapter 15.